Welcome to today's video. I'm gonna start with a message for y'all. If you want to be respectful in the comments and disagree with me, I'm a-okay with it. But if you just wanna gatekeep Berserk for everybody, this is the wrong place to do so. Berserk is for everybody who wants to read it. I will be critical of Berserk because even masterpieces are subjected to criticism, and I will remain true to myself, to my opinion, to my values. So, if you're bothered by that, this arc starts in an exciting way because we're back to the main conflict, even if brief. Griffith, Casca, and Guts meet again at the Hill of Swords. This encounter demonstrates how Griffith is changed, but it's imperceptible to know what changed, besides being a demon. The last time Guts met Griffith, they were in another dimension, when the God Hand were forcing the Count to sacrifice his daughter. That moment hasn't left my mind for one bit when it comes to Griffith's future. There are remnants of his humanity in Guts and Casca, just like there were in the Count due to his daughter. Casca and Guts remaining alive will certainly be part of Griffith's downfall. On the Hill of Swords, Griffith admits that is why he is there, to see if there's a hint of humanity in him, but he claims there isn't. If so, then why did he make the effort to go there and check? Beyond that, he feels his heart accelerate in face of seeing Guts in danger while fighting Zod. Although he thinks it must be from the monstrous fetus that fused with his vessel, I think it's not as superficial as that. All of Griffith's wrongs can't be undone in any way, but he still feels a hint of empathy towards his old companions. He also protects Casca from Zod as he is about to strike at Guts, and she's in the crossfire. After Griffith and Zod leave, Guts opens up about something deeply personal to him and Casca. Telling Rickert and Puck what Griffith did also shows the character development this man has gone through. For years he had tall walls surrounding him, but after finding love in Casca, Guts changed for the better, allowing himself to open up more. Especially after the serious talk he had with the blacksmith in the other arc about how life is short and how revenge is useless, Guts seems to have matured into a man more in touch with his positive feelings. Yes, King! But once again, the story deviates from the main conflict of our lovely trio. They tread once more different paths. Griffith goes on to fulfill his dream and get his kingdom after the fight with Zod destroyed the elven cave that protects them from demons. Guts and Casca are too forced to leave, considering they put Rickert and Erica in danger. This is where I wish the story would have picked up after the Eclipse, after the Black Swordsman arc and the Rampage of Revenge. A visit to the graves of the band is also a perfect time to rekindle the main conflict. And a way to move on should start with searching for a place to truly keep Casca safe in her state. A search for a haven where they can live in peace. Don't abandon what you can't replace. Despite the story taking a turn to avoid the main conflict once again, I don't think this was as a bad decision as it was in the last arc. Being one of the most complicated characters of Berserk, I was more than glad to accompany Griffith on his journey. The beautiful imagery from the holy war between the Kushan Empire and Griffith, and Miura's dissection of religious war and grey morals makes this worthwhile. With this power, we know Griffith is getting what he wants, but it won't be an easy path. Not because his enemies are so mighty he will have a hard time defeating them, but because he wants to make his deception believable in the eyes of everyone. His true struggle is to make his subjects believe him, his holiness and sheer will to do good by them. In the process, he uses the same name as the Band of the Hawk to form a new band of warriors to serve him. The mere use of the name only proves that Griffith cared so little about those around him. They were all, and still are, a means to an end. Even the new acolytes make us recall certain members of the former band. Guts' recklessness in battle is present in the demons, and the blind worshipping from Sonia is akin to what Casca once did. It's not like Griffith misses his companions, but the characteristics he searches for in his followers are the most important factor in acquiring them. Griffith becomes a force to be reckoned with against the Kushan Empire, using religion to his advantage for the people to see him as a savior. He mobilizes all remaining noble houses from Midland to his side. Peasants cheer him on as a hero sent by God, since he's liberating them from the Kushan Empire. Even the pontiff dreams of the coming of the White Hawk, which was likely a trick from Sonia or Griffith himself. Gathering the pontiff by his side, Griffith is conceded permission to legitimize his kingdom in the future. He even marries Griffith to Princess Charlotte, officially making him king. So his conquest is a slow process, but not in order to defeat his enemies, but to remain a hero, remain a figure to worship. Ganishka is also the dude Griffith uses to make his battles seem more heroic. He's just a pawn in Griffith's game to legitimize himself in the eyes of the pontiff, making his war in the zealots' eyes a religious war, a war for their nation. The people eat it up, not knowing Griffith's true intentions. Ganishka's transformation into a gigantic monster also serves to show his people how heroic Griffith is. With the aid of the Skull Knight and his Belahid sword, Ganishka goes through a second reincarnation which opens up a portal into the deepest layers of the astral world. The light consuming the head of Ganishka's giant form explodes outward and causes fantastic creatures of the astral world to appear in the physical world, along with the God Hand. This is a spectacle that the people deem a miracle. Voss recognizes a city nearby as one that predates Windham itself. The pontiff, deeming it a place worthy of Griffith, christens the city Falconia. So Griffith finally gets his kingdom, though through deceit, murder, and anything that must be done. While Griffith fulfills his conquest of Midland, other forces stand watch. Schierke is introduced as an opposing force to him, seeing through his beauty and ambition for the evil power he truly is. Well aware he's the king of the blind white sheep and the sinful black ones. Speaking of Schierke, with the constant presence of demons and evil forces, it would be inevitable to introduce benevolent forces, or even neutral ones at that could help Guts achieve the impossible, a human to kill a God Hand. I was pleased to know that Miura gave himself the trouble to even research real-life magic. I went in search of lots of reference books on magic, and amongst them was a book written by someone claiming to be a real magician. It sounds shady at first, but there are magic users overseas, and they have the authoritative opinions on the subject. I thought I'd faithfully portray the way a real magician conceptualizes magic. I got my reference materials in order and decided to ponder what true magic was, or even just the impression thereof. And what I actually learned was that magic was more of an inner thing than I'd thought. When you use magic, the important thing is to visualize the spell being carried out one layer higher. The astral world, that is. and to precisely envision the vague imagery. Unless you do that, you can't express the magic of which real magic users speak. He believed that to make a successful story and reinvent a trope like magic, one has to go to the roots of the trope. Any good writer will tell you this. Research is incredibly important. This process to construct magic didn't make his magic system much more creative than what already existed, but that wasn't the most important thing. In my opinion, the trickiest thing to introduce in an already established world with a low magic system would be to introduce magic that wouldn't clash with what was already established. Until this moment, which is a bit more than halfway through Berserk, we got introduced to demons, the God Hand, and the Behelit, with time to absorb what each of these mean in this world and their weight in the narrative. These concepts were introduced carefully and slowly. The first arc focuses a lot on this, then we get more and more as we're introduced to Zod and the Eclipse. So the reader dwelt on these for 3 arcs and 180 chapters. The introduction of witches also has an adequate pace as Guts and the party enter Flora's woods. Guts even feels a slight tingle in his mark, but doesn't react as it does with demons, which could be interpreted as magic recognizing a benevolent force when opposed to demons around who make it bleed. Given the dimension where the God Hand were in the Black Swordsman arc, and the dimension of the Eclipse, arguably different places, it was a natural thing when other spirit realms were mentioned. Magic itself and more magic items beyond the Behelit also felt like a natural addition to Berserk. The mere existence of Clifa? Let's just call it Cly, is confusing, only because we're introduced to Slern as a God Hand, a queen of the underworld, and demons, and now she's not quite that. Although it confused me at first, I started to question the very nature of the God Hand. I'm glad we're not spoon-fed all the time, leaving enough space to question things like this. Are the God Hand angels or demons? Or both? From our main character's POV, they're certainly evil forces, haven't taken from them their family in their reality. As a reader, I think we're forced to question if they're more than just demons with power and perhaps even their deities. The Berserk armor is another new concept introduced, shrouded in mystery for us and our characters. As we approach the end of Berserk, Guts encounters magic and gains more tools to be able to fight Griffith. From that last attempt, Guts tried to fight Griffith in the Black Swordsman arc. We're aware he's not able to fight him in a normal way. To fight a God Hand, Guts will need far more than his sword and a cannon arm. The Berserk armor not only provides him with means to an end, but it also takes a toll on Guts. The only world-building element that seemed to clash with Miura's writing is the rushed scenes in the Enoch village, where Schierke introduces the logic of magic and astral worlds. Since then, Schierke has also been a major vessel to info dump as Miura sees fit. Much of it could have been just represented visually rather than having Schierke explain how every tiny little detail works. Miura didn't trust the reader to be smart enough to figure out things on their own, and that pained me to see since other world-building elements had been introduced so effortlessly. It isn't also the last time Schierke is used as a device to info dump rather than a character, and that takes away from her agency as a character besides being later used as an anchor for Guts. Besides the magic info dump being bad in itself, every single element is introduced in a rushed manner to the reader. Suddenly, Serpico and Isidro use magic objects effortlessly too, and their magic is also exposed in a rushed way. Found family is one of my favorite tropes. As I think I mentioned in the Golden Age arc video, it's great to see Guts find the Band of the Hawk after such emotional turmoil in his life. But after the eclipse, Guts' newfound family felt forced. A commenter reminded me of how unpopular Berserk became after the eclipse, a somewhat justified reaction from fans at the time. The story went down in popularity with the readers around the time of the eclipse. Many readers were furious that I'd do such a thing to the characters they liked. I had to pay attention to make sure the flow of the story wasn't completely severed with the eclipse. That's why I spared Casca. If she had died and the serialization had continued for a long time, I feared the reason for revenge would become something of the past. It may seem calculating and unpleasant, but it's because Casca's by his side that he can never forget the eclipse. Today, I think most of us look at it in a more positive light. Except for the aftermath, that had to be something more pleasing to the reader back then. Thus, Farnese, Serpico, Isidro, and Schierke. I don't think they're crucial additions to the plot except for Schierke. The reintroduction of the found family trope felt forced, as it once had been done before, but terminated painfully. There are things we can't replace, and it's undeniable that what Guts had in the Band of the Hawk was a family. After all the hardships, the reintroduction of a similar concept in the story felt almost like a marketing ploy, not really Muriel's imagination. Many writers change their stories even nowadays to suit the story to what sells most. Not saying this was exactly the case. I'm not omnipotent, but it sure seemed like it. Despite being a lone wolf, Guts accepts this new-found family more easily than before. Besides having grown as a character, Guts also sees the urgency to protect Casca from himself. But we could have had a more limited cast of characters follow him, like just Schierke, who is actually useful to the story. Isidro was the comic relief character no one asked for, Serpico is the flattest character Miura wrote so far, and Farnese should have had more weight in the narrative but turns into a babysitter. For someone as cruel as Farnese, as sadistic as her, there's a hard shift in her character that doesn't make sense. It makes sense that she had the interest to follow Guts, but not to be a babysitter for someone she barely knows. We've observed that ever since she was a child, Farnese wasn't kind to others, being arrogant for being a lady and thinking the world should be kissing her feet. She's a spoiled brat. Guts changed the whole world, but in a religious way. Farnese questions the very nature of religion and God, leaving even her noble family behind to discover the true essence of the world. Her nature is inquisitive and cruel at the same time, except once she joins Guts and Casca, her cruelty vanishes, and her sexual desires also change, as she is no longer depicted taking pleasure in pain. Kinks don't work like that just because you're setting off on a self-discovering journey. Not only was she a woman in power for most of her life with cruel intentions, but Farnese also manages to force Serpico to kill his mother. Are you telling me she would have been chill with just babysitting Casca? Really? It isn't believable. I get that Casca isn't really Casca and needs someone to look out for her, but that someone should always be Guts. Farnese also seems to lose her bravery to face issues and turns into a damsel in distress. I can understand that faced with Clifoth, creature anyone would freeze and stop, especially Farnese, who has been slowly gaining the ability to see these creatures. In situations like in the Enoch village chapters, Casca and Farnese are nothing but damsels in distress, for no other reason than fan service, let's be honest here. Sometimes Isidro has more agency than them, defending himself, which is quite ridiculous because he's a child. It should bother everyone that they're the only two potential characters exposed to rape. There were only 2 rape scenes that were relevant to the plot. The others are only there, gods know why. If there's one thing I hate in manga and anime, is unnecessarily long flashbacks. The flashbacks on how Farnese and Serpico meet serve nothing else but to justify why Farnese is so fucked up. Surprise, surprise, it's daddy and mummy issues. Her fantasies to destroy and hurt people for self-pleasure also find a base, but nothing is added to the story. We just know that Farnese and Serpico are siblings and that he is a bastard. Beyond that, a lingering cloud of incest surrounds these two, with Serpico letting her give him pain for her self-pleasure. He shows signs that he seems to know about this since he met her, yet he lets her do these things to him while knowing they're siblings. Serpico also saw himself in the people who were arrested by the Holy See. They struggled to get food and shelter to be warm and safe as he once did. He could have easily been burned already if his mother hadn't told him he was a bastard. Let's not forget, there is no reason for Serpico to be with Farnese after she asks him to burn his own mother. Prove me she's not your mother. Would you remain by someone's side, friend or sibling, if they asked you to kill your mother? Heretic or criminal, whatever. Once again, Miura subjects these characters to an unrealistic situation. One of the most important decisions Miura took in this arc, as I view it, was the necessity to address the aftermath of the eclipse, putting the revenge arc aside for a moment. We know Guts will never forgive Griffith, neither will he stop wanting revenge. The birth ceremony proved to us that it's more important to fight the apostles and kill instead of saving Casca right away. It's a hunger that will never abandon Guts. It's this duality that makes his character flawed and human. Nonetheless, the previous arc also delayed any development from the very character that changed Guts for the better. If not for Casca, Guts wouldn't have probably cared that much for revenge. If not for Casca, Guts would have probably not cared that much for revenge, as Miura said in the previous quote. The scene he had to witness while demons pinned him to the ground was the very thing that drove him blind to take revenge. Casca is as important to the story as Griffith and Guts. She almost unalived herself after spending months with depression over Griffith's absence. She lost Guts and Griffith at the same time, roughly, having to endure for the rest of the Band of the Hawk. During the eclipse, she was already in a frail state, having to reject Guts to take care of Griffith, and let's not forget the sexual abuse she had to endure before the eclipse from that disgusting apostle, and during the eclipse from Griffith. And all of her friends died. And lastly, after the eclipse, she had a miscarriage of a baby she could have had with Guts. She's a warrior, both emotionally and physically. She suffered much more than Guts, and all he does is run off to kill demons. He is a flawed protagonist, and this makes sense. But never once he considers a way to help her out of her state. It's infuriating that such an important character was not only neglected by Guts, but also by Miura. I've already voiced my frustration about it in the last Berserk video, but it's never too much to mention that Casca was traumatized from volume 14 to volume 41. That's more than half of Berserk. If you love a person, you don't give up on them. And I'm glad Guts matured enough to see that. It's just frustrating the conviction arc passed and no one spoke about making her life safer or to search for a cure or something. Even if at a snail's pace, it's great that the main conflict is being explored once again. Guts found a way to help Casca and Griffith founded his kingdom. Casca's regain of agency can be seen on the horizon, while Farnese's is also taken from her. Going back to the basics of fantasy with damsels in distress doesn't suit Berserk's tone at all, especially with such strong female characters. The constant sexual and racist innuendos get increasingly annoying, especially when it comes to 12-year-old Schierke. Although magic was introduced sloppily, it makes sense to be introduced sooner rather than later because Guts would have never been able to defeat Griffith with his sword alone. So, I hope you enjoyed and I'll see you next time. Bye.